The Shocker amp is just one of many Shocker paintball guns. We first saw the Shockers in the 90s with the shoebox Shocker. It was a very large and bulky paintball gun, but it was unique in the time as it was low pressure and a spool valve. And then in the early 2000s, we got the Shocker SFT. The SFT was extremely popular, and then it was quickly followed up by the Shocker NXT. Then Shockers kind of went away. We didn't see them for about 8 to 9 years until 2015 when the Shocker RSX came out. The RSX was much smaller and much more modern. We saw, the quick release bolt, and it was just a very streamlined small design. And then they followed that up with the Shocker XLS, which was kind of just a little bit larger RSX with a few tweaks and modifications to the overall gun. And since both those guns did really well for them, the RSX and the XLS, we have the amp. And just like the Shocker XLS, it was kind of just a rolling upgrade, and the amp, I kind of feel like it's the same way. It's not like a revolutionary change, right? I mean, when you look at the Shocker XLS and compare it directly to the amp, they definitely look very similar, right? The overall ergonomics are going to be the same. So on the XLS, they actually extended the reach of the gun, separating that foregrip and the trigger frame, making the gun feel a little bit longer, and they've used that same ergonomics or the same length on that amp. So it's going to have a very similar feel and ergonomics compared to the Shocker XLS. One thing they have done though to change the ergonomics a little bit is slim up the foregrip even more. So definitely that RSX and the XLS were kind of just known for being very small, just small paintball guns, right? I mean, the foregrip is very small on these. And with the amp, they've made it even smaller. So previously on the, say the XLS, the foregrip was just a regular looking aluminum foregrip, and they included a rubber sleeve or rubber grip you could slide over the front to just make it a little bit more chunky and add a little bit more grip. But with the amp, they've actually cut the foregrip away to actually make the rubber kind of fit and be a little bit more streamlined on there. So while the foregrip on the amp is technically smaller, I mean, it's so minutely smaller, it's not really that noticeable. But for me still, as you can see here, me holding this gun, it does feel a little bit weird in my hands as my hands are just kind of too big for the thing. One of the things I really do like though that they've changed on the amp is the trigger. So I always like these triggers that are really round and have a really round face that aren't really flat. Because the way I hold the gun, I think because of my big hand, I kind of hold them weird. So I hit the trigger on the side a little bit, and I find that with these rounder triggers, like on the amp, the whole ergonomics is just better for me, right? I feel like I can shoot the gun faster. It just feels better in my hands. The triggers feel more responsive when they're round. So I just like the rounded trigger a little more. And on the grip frame, they actually slimmed up the back grips a little bit. So they've kind of added a little bit of an hourglass shape to the top of these. I find it more comfortable. I don't know, I just think it fits my hand a little bit better. They've actually added a little bit of weather sealing around the grip so that if you're taking dives in mud or water or something like that, you're a little less likely to get water ingress into the board and cause damage. Removing that trigger frame to clean stuff or just do regular maintenance is also much easier now. So removing the trigger frame, you just remove one screw in the back of the frame, and the frame just kind of comes off. There are no eye wires you got to worry about here. There's no solenoid wires and none of that stuff. So in the previous gun, on the XLS, you actually had to remove 2 trigger frame screws, 2 grip screws, unplug the solenoid wire, and then you always had to worry about the eye wires that were connecting the top of the gun to the bottom of the gun. But now, like a lot of the high-end guns, the bottom trigger frame, the main board, and the top of the gun are actually not connected by a wire. They just have those 2 contact points on the back of the frame and on the back of the body to make that connection. That's really nice as it just makes putting stuff together a lot easier. You don't have to worry about where the eye wires or where wires are going, so you're not pinching or breaking wires as much. I'm a big fan of these more streamlined, clean wireless guns. It's very nice. And the inside of here, you can actually see that everything looks very nice, right? Everything's very high quality. Fit and finish is very well made. So the inside parts of this gun, like that solenoid, you can actually see that air transfer pipe on the inside of there. Everything's very well made. That air transfer pipe's kind of weird too. Normally you don't see that stainless steel tube on the inside of the gun. Typically what we're seeing at least is air being transferred inside. So they're actually drilling air passages through the body of the guns most of the time. But here, to save a little bit of money and to save a little bit of weight, I think, they've actually used this little pipe to remove air from the back of the bolt to the front of the gun. So it's cool, right? You can remove the trigger frame really easy. It comes off super slick. But there's really not a reason to remove the trigger frame, right? I mean, How often do you remove the trigger frame? I mean, the only reason I would remove the trigger frame, say on the amp, is when the mechanical frame comes out. You know, they're gonna sell a mechanical frame for 200 bucks, so swapping over to the mechanical to electric. But most people aren't doing that. Most people, I feel like, leave it electric or they're leaving it mechanical. Or maybe say you broke something. So say the solenoid's having problems, or you got shot in there or something. But those are all kind of rare, right? I'm far more likely to need to remove the eye covers. If I break a paintball, I got to remove the eye covers to clean inside there. And the eye covers, you have to have an Allen wrench. So I have to go get tools to remove the eye covers. Well, that's just kind of annoying. And then the grips to be able to change the battery, to be able to put that 9-volt in that trigger frame, I have to get an Allen wrench out to remove the grips. That's just kind of annoying, right? Where the 170R from Planet Eclipse, you can clean the eyes really, really simply without tools, and you can change the batteries without tools. I don't know, it's just an observation. And it's still using the same electronics and the same board as before. So it's gonna have a very, very bright OLED screen that's got a bunch of information on there. And then a 9-volt battery is still gonna go inside that trigger frame. For previous Shocker owners too, you might notice that the on-off knob is actually different on here. It's not that much different. It was just really sharp and kind of like pointy before. So I like this kind of rounded one. It just feels a little bit nicer on your hand. The bolt on the amp still comes out very easy like all of the previous Shockers. Well, maybe not all of them. Definitely the Shocker RSX and the XLS, you could remove the bolt really quickly. You just pushed a button right there on the bottom beneath the bolt and it just kind of popped out the back. But this did have problems. There was a button, so you get like dirt or stuff in there, and sometimes it wouldn't work right. So I much prefer this kind of twist style. I feel like this is gonna last longer, be more durable, and be a little bit nicer. But I still think the very simple design of like the Planet Eclipse stuff or, a lot of the other manufacturers is a little bit nicer. This looks cool and it's like neat and like engineered really well. But I think that sometimes these like intricate, complicated designs on paintball guns don't go so well. So I don't know. It's going well so far. I mean, there aren't like problems with it. So I don't know. And I said previously kind of how the amp was just like a upgraded Shocker XLS, as the exterior kind of looks the same, but the biggest change they did make is really kind of a large, big, huge change. They completely changed the bolt. One of the trends in paintball now, over the last like 3 to 4 years, has been to copy Planet Eclipse. So Planet Eclipse came out with the Gamma Core bolt system, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. And a lot of the manufacturers have just kind of copied it because it's so good, right? And that's kind of what Shocker have done here. So by copying the Gamma Core, really they've kind of done two things. They've lowered the operating pressure. It just made the gun more air efficient. One of the things they did get rid of on the amp that they had on the RSX and the XLS was the bolt speed adjustment. So on the previous guns, you could adjust just how fast the bolt kind of moved back and forth. It really wouldn't affect velocity that much, but it would definitely affect the way the gun shot. So you could make the bolt move faster to like get better air efficiency or slow it down to make it a little easier on paint. But now the amp, you can't do any of that. The bolt speed just moves as fast as it moves. It's not adjustable, which for me, I think is great. I think that the more things people have to adjust, the more they screw stuff up and the more stuff there is to break. So I think overall, for most users, having no adjustability is probably a good thing. But I knew guys that are super smart and they're technical and they like kind of messing with stuff. They liked that. They liked being able to like kind of tweak and tune and adjust the gun to make it shoot like they wanted. So if you are one of those guys, that adjustment's missing, but I think overall it's probably a good thing. So now the Shocker amp works at about 105 to like 110 PSI, and you can see that bolt now is considerably shorter than the previous one on the XLS. So having just less mass moving around makes the gun kick a little bit less, and I think shoot snappier. So you kind of get a more quicker, crisper, faster feeling shot, which I prefer. I kind of like that. I think that having less kick still, but it has that like snap to it, so it kind of gives a little bit more feedback when it's shooting. Something I really like. But I don't know, right? Like I see here and I'm like talking about these guns and I'm like, man, it's so hard to say the difference with the way high-end guns shoot now, right? Like you're shooting an amp, you're shooting the Go4, you got a CS2, maybe you got the brand new MacGev XDR. All these guns shoot so well that like, it's kind of just preference. And maybe not even at that point. It's just like placebo effect? I don't know. One thing that's definitely not placebo effect is the air efficiency. So I used to do these air efficiency tests, right? Go out and shoot a bunch of paint. But then I was like, God damn, I just wasted $60 in paint. I'm not doing it anymore. So I have not done an air efficiency test, but there are a lot of other air efficiency tests online, and they're extremely impressive. So the air efficiency in the amp's really kind of crazy. I mean, some guys are reporting 12 to 13 pods and a hopper on a 77, or you can even get 11 pods in a hopper on a 68. That's really like 20 to 30% improvement in air efficiency, which is really good. I mean, that's a lot of paint. One of the coolest things I think about the new Shockers that started with the Shocker RSX is the way they've kind of like made these indication spots on the regulator. So there are 3 holes on the back of the regulator, and when one of those holes leaks, you can actually look in the manual, and the manual will indicate which O-ring to change. That's just super handy. That is not a feature we see on a lot of paintball guns. I think it'd be really kind of neat if we saw that like incorporated into the body somewhere, you know, like put a hole in the top of the body or something and be like, well, if it leaks from this hole, it's one of these 2 O-rings. I think that'd be really neat, but I really find the holes in the back of the regulator extremely handy when fixing these guns. So overall, I think the amp is certainly a better paintball gun than the XLS, right? So I didn't really like the XLS that much. I did not like the ergonomics. As I said before, right, these guns are just like too small for my hands. It just doesn't work that well. But I think that, you know, changing the grips around a little bit, making them a little bit slimmer at the top, and then changing that to that rounded face on that trigger actually helps improve the ergonomics a lot for me. So I think that ergonomically, maybe if you didn't like the amp before, you might now with those little tweaks to the ergonomics. I never thought that the Shocker RSX or the XLS shot poorly, but I'm definitely happy that they switched over to the new bolt. I think that that improved reliability, definitely better air efficiency, and then that lower pressure, you know, are good things. But overall, the amp, I think, is a very good deal, right? I mean, I think that now with paintball guns, we've reached this point where like, you don't really have to spend over $1,000 to get something very good. We have these really great examples in the Shocker amp and the 170R from Planet Eclipse. But I think that like if I'm personally choosing, I'm still probably leaning toward that 170R because I think the overall build quality is better, and then just long-term reliability is probably going to be better from the Planet Eclipse guns. But it doesn't have some of the cool, neat features that the amp's going to have, right? Like removing the frame is definitely more difficult on the 170R. But then again, that 170R does have the like, you know, quick release or removable eye covers that don't require tools, and you can change the batteries in that foregrip without tools as well. So I don't know, I think that both of these guns, whether it's the amp or the 170R, definitely have like pros and cons to either of them. The amp's trigger is better than the 170R too. I don't know, they're both very good paintball guns. Yeah, you don't have to spend $1,000. I think that's the takeaway from here.